Hello, this is Edward Lambert with another video of six-element theory. This video is going to be very different. It's going to be about a calendar that uses the symbols of six-element theory. And this is going to be a calendar that talks about the sun cycle. There's another calendar that talks about the moon cycle. I'll do another video on that. But let's focus in on the sun cycle here. So within the symmetries of six-element theory, a calendar can be made to track the yearly sun cycles. And the calendar is very exact. So in the calendar there are 5 cycles. First you have this inner cycle, which is the days. You can see the days here. The cycle goes around and it counts 4 7-day periods. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then a 7th day. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then a 7th day. So it covers 4 of these 7-day periods going around the cycle. And then you have the next cycle, which is the weeks. So for every 7-day period, this one counts a mark. So you have 13 weeks through here, another 13 weeks, another 13 weeks, another 13 weeks. So 4 of these cycles become 52 weeks, which is 1 year. So this week cycle, once around, is 1 year. And then you have this month cycle, which counts 4 13-month periods. Now, here's this month cycle. So you have 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, 4 month, 5 month, 6 month. And a month is one time around the daily cycle. So every time you go one time around this daily cycle, you mark a month. 13 months is 1 year. So in this cycle, 1/4 of the cycle is 1 year. This will be a 2nd year, 3rd year, and the 4th year. So that's the month cycle. Now you go to the cycle 4, which counts years. So every time you count a year, you count here. 1, 2, 3rd year, 4th year, 5th year, 6th year. This is the year cycle. And you have 13 years in here, 26 years, 39 years, 52 years. So that's sort of the basic cycles. And then you have this outside cycle of these, see these little purple squares going around here? This adjusts the solstice time every 13 years. I'll get to that towards the end of the video. So this just gives you an idea that the calendar is broken up into days, weeks, months, and years. We're all used to days, weeks, months, and years. 7-day weeks and months of 28 days and years. So here's the cycle. But we're going to find out that when you mark time in a certain way, this calendar becomes very simple, very consistent, and very exact. So now days must be added at regular intervals in order for the calendar to be exact. And I will show how these days are added. How exact is the calendar? It is 35 seconds off every year, and I'll show you how I get there. So if you live to 100, the calendar would be off still less than an hour after 100 years. So you can use this calendar for your whole life and still be very exact and know when the solstice times are. Even if you don't have access to computers and scientific things, you'll know pretty much where the solstice times are for your area. So let's get started. Okay, counting time. Scientifically, the time it takes for the sun to return to its seasonal point every year is 365.24219 days. This calendar counts 365.24260 days. The difference every year is 0.00041 days. In other words, 0.00041 times 86,400 seconds in a day equals 35.4 seconds. How does this calendar count 365.24260 days per year? Well, let's look at each cycle and count them as we go. Okay, let's start by counting days. The innermost cycle of the calendar counts days. In the image to the right, we see the innermost cycle colored. So over here you'll see that this first week is yellow, 2nd week is blue, 3rd week is green, 4th week is red. So the first 6 days are colored with yellow. You see 6 days in yellow with a 7th day in the blue cross. So you count 6 yellow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the 7th day enters this blue cross area. And I'll get to what this blue cross means or could mean, depending on your point of view, later. And then the second 6 days are colored with blue. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the 7th day enters the blue cross again. And this second week is counted in the next cycle by blue. Okay, so here we see that this yellow week corresponds to this first yellow week in the week cycle. This blue week corresponds to this mark here of the second week in the week cycle. The innermost cycle counts 28 days. 4 times 7. So you have 4 weeks of 7 days. This full inner cycle is a 1 month. So it is counted 13 times in a year. Giving 13 times 28 is 364 days. So if you just go around this cycle 13 times, you're going to end up with 364 days. You're still a day short. So there's going to be a day counted at the end of every year, and I'll show you how that's done. Okay, here we have the calendar. And right now you can see that it's set for November 12th, 2012. And the day is seed. I've got the days broken up into the elements of the 6-element theory. And you can see that this is the week marked out here. It's getting towards the end of the year, November. So it's coming down through the fall. This is the fall, winter, spring, summer, back to the fall. So once you come back down to here, that's the winter solstice. So we're going to run through the days and show you how the days go. So here we go. You see the seed just moved to wood. Then it moved the 7th day of that week, goes into that little X in the blue cross. Now as you see, as the new week starts, this mark here for the week is going to jump out. See how that new week jumped out to here? Okay, so let's just keep going on a little bit. I'm going to come down here, finish off that week. 7th day in the blue. Now we're going to start a new week and a new month. So you're going to see this month and this week, both of these marks move forward one. Here we go. See that? A new week, and now the month jumped all the way down to here. So now we're in the last month of the year, right here. And we've got the first day, so let's just run through this. Fire, earth, air, water, seed, wood, back to the 7th. Fire, earth, air, water, seed, wood, back to the 7th day. Fire, earth, air, water, seed, back to wood. And now we're going to come to the last day of the year, right there. And so we're on the last day of the week, last day of the month, last week of the year, last month of the year. Here we are. So everything's the last day of the year, but you still have to add one more day. So as I go one more day, you'll see this box fill with an X. And that's the last day of the year that gives you 365 days a year. I'll show later on in the video how to get more time, because 365 is not exact enough. We need to get to about 365.24219 days. Okay, let's move on. Okay, now we're going to count weeks. So the next cycle outward counts weeks, 7 days. In the image to the right, each 7-day period in the day cycle is colored with the corresponding color in the week cycle. So remember that this is the yellow week right here. So you can see all the yellow weeks are marked with yellow out here in the weekly cycle. So there are 52 weeks around the week cycle, which gives 364 days. This is counted every year the same way. At the end of 52 weeks, an extra day is counted, shown within a red circle. Remember, I just showed you that in the little clip of the calendar before. Thus, the cycle counts 365 days. Every 13th week is counted in the blue cross. So you got 13 weeks. The 13th week is right here. So this yellow week right here is a 13th week. The blue week will be a 13th week here. The green week will be a 13th week here. And the red week will be a 13th week here. Now one can follow the sun's movement through the sky throughout the year by seeing which week is current. So when the mark is down here in the week cycle, it's the winter solstice. It's long nights, short days. So right down here is the week with the longest night. And so as you move up here, you'll see that the days are getting longer. And then spring starts, and the days are getting longer still. And by the time the mark comes up here, you're at the summer solstice, where the days are the longest and the nights are the shortest. And then you come down here, you can see you're entering fall, and then you come down here to the winter solstice. So as you follow the marks around this cycle, you know where you are in the year. Now we're going to count months and years. The third cycle out from the center counts months. You'll see that this is this yellow here, then the blue here, then the green here, then the red here. This is a cycle that counts months. So you'll see over here the image to the right, the cycle starts with 13 yellow months right here, then 13 blue months, 13 6 months, and then 13 red months. So there's like a yellow year here, blue year, green year, red year. So the 13 months count 1 year. So the full cycle around the calendar counts 4 years. When you go around these months, this is 4 years going around that month cycle. Now, is it even important to count months? Yes. This month cycle adds 1 extra day every 4 years. This month cycle adds 1 extra day every 4 years. But then the 13th year is allowed to pass before starting the count of another 4 years. So you come around 4 years, and then you add an extra day right here in that red circle. Then you go around another 4 years, that's 8 years, count another day. Then you go around another 4 years, that's 12 years, count another day. And then you let a 13th year pass. And then you start counting your 4-year cycle from this point. 1, 2, 3, 4. And add another day right here. 5, 6, 7, 8. Add another day. 9, 10, 11, 12. Add another day here. Then you let a 13th year pass. And then you start counting your 4-year cycle from this point. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you add a day after those 4 years. 5, 6, 7, 8. Add another day after those 8 years. 9, 10, 11, 12. Add another day. Then you let a 13th year pass. And you start counting your 4 years from here. 4, 8, 12. Adding a day at each end of 4 years. Then you let a 13th year pass. Now the calendar that the Mayans had and the calendar that we use nowadays adds a day after every 4 years. And doesn't let this 13th year pass. It just every 4 years you add another leap year, they call it. The leap year, the leap year, the leap day. So you add another, February 29th every 4 years. But this calendar is special and different in that you let a 13th year pass. Why do you let a 13th year pass? It's a spiritual thing. It's a symbolic thing. There's so many things I could say. I could bring in so many religious backgrounds. It's like a 7th day of rest, 13th year of rest, where you just let the time pass before you start getting back into that cycle of counting and adding, cycle of 4 years. That 13th year becomes very important. Yes, there are 12 meridians, 12 signs, but returning to spirit is the basic idea of this 13th, returning to the 13th, or returning to the 7. It's returning to spirit. It's like in the Tao Te Ching when it says you watch the 10,000 things and then you watch them return to the Tao. This becomes the 13th step, the 13th year, or the 7th day in a weekly cycle. That's sort of the meaning of this, but letting that 13th year pass has a deep meaning. There's sabbatical traditions too, where every 7 years or every 13 years, you just take a break. You go on vacation, you go enrich yourself, go on a retreat, something like that. So that's how it works. So you're really adding 12 extra days in a 52-year cycle. Whereas in the Mayan calendar and the calendar that we use, we're adding 13 extra days in a 52-year cycle. But this calendar adds just 12 days in a 52-year cycle. So by doing that, you're adding another 0.230769 days per year. The calendar has now added enough days to have 365.230769 days per year. Since the actual year is 365.24219 days long, the calendar is about 6 minutes off at this point. So just by adding days at the end of every 4 years, and then letting a 13th year pass, just getting that point, you're 16 minutes off. Okay, now I'm going to show you how these days are counted using the calendar. Okay, so here we are back in December 16th, 2011. This is December 16th, so it's getting close to the winter solstice, a couple of days away. And so this is the end of a 4-year period, so we're going to add an extra day. Okay, here we go. 17th, you can see the days coming here, getting close to the end of the year. Wood. Now this is the last day of the month cycle, last day of the week. So you have the last day of the last week. This is the last week of the year, last day of the last week, and this is the last month right here. So the day that's going to be added is going to show up here in this box right here to correspond with this count from this point in time. So watch. Here comes the last day of the year right here, and then we go one more day. See right here? This is another day that's added, and this is a day that's added every 4 years in this cycle. Now a 13th year is going to pass through here. If we just go on and start the year starts the day after the winter solstice, first day of the week, first month. You see that the year has come down here into the 13th year of a cycle. So now you know at this 13th year of the cycle that the 4-year count is not going to take place. So while the year sits in this blue cross, the 4-year cycle where a day is added at the end of every 4 years is not counted. This 13th year passes, and then you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and you add a day at the end of this cycle. 1, 2, 3, 4, you add a day at the end of this 4-year cycle. 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, you add a day at the end of this. And then when it reaches here, the 13th year, you just stop counting to add a day. And then you go 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, add a day. 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, add a day. 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, add a day. And when it reaches this 13th year of the cycle, you just let it pass. Go on sabbatical, take a vacation, enrich yourself, however you want to do it. Okay, so that's how days are added every 4 years. Okay, now we're going to be adjusting the moment of the winter solstice. At the end of 13 years, the time of the winter solstice is adjusted. In the image to the right, the time is adjusted by 2 marks counterclockwise. So from here to here. The time of the winter solstice will follow this movement. So every 13 years, the winter solstice basically moves from this point in time to here. It's kind of moving very slowly over 13 years, and by the end of 13 years, you just make one adjustment, boom, you catch up with it. Then over 13 years, it's kind of moving here from during the middle of the night to when the sun rises, to a little bit after the sun rises to here. And at the end of 13 years, you make an adjustment, you catch up to it. And then over the next 13 years, it's kind of moving out this way, going towards the morning, and then it ends up out here just before midday sun. And after the 13 years, make an adjustment, boom. And you'll find when you track the time and by science that the winter solstice will follow this. So every 13 years, you just make an adjustment to keep up with the time. So you're always within a couple of hours every year. The calendar that the Mayans used and the calendar that we use nowadays has no reference to the solstice time whatsoever. There's no way to even know where the solstice is. With this calendar, when you know that this box is green, the solstice is somewhere, at the end of every year, the solstice is somewhere around midnight. That's all you really need to know. And then 13 years later, you'll know that its solstice is somewhere around 3 o'clock in the morning, like that. 13 years later, you know the solstice is somewhere around 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, like that. And you'll just know where the solstice is by looking at the calendar. And this calendar will track solstice times for years upon years upon years. After 100 years, you'll only be an hour off. And if you know scientifically how to make that adjustment, you can just make the adjustment for an hour and the calendar will be back to being exact again. So it's a very simple calendar. So you can read over here, but once you go through making this adjustment, at the end, the calendar becomes accurate to 35 seconds per year. Just by making this one little adjustment every 13 years, following the 13-year cycle, following the 13th year meaning of 13 years of 12 meridians, 12 years, up to a 13th year, which is a return to spirit, however you want to define that, using your own spiritual tradition. So the nice thing about this calendar is that it keeps exact with the solstice time through the years. Let me show you an example of how this little box will move at the end of 13 years. Okay, so here we are, December 15th, 2012, which was pretty much the end of the Mayan calendar. So we'll just say, okay, the Mayan calendar, at the end of the Mayan calendar, we mark the end of a 13th year. Okay? So here we are, right here, coming towards the end of the year. Water, seed, wood. Okay, we've got the last day of the week, on the last week of the year, on the last month of the year, on the 13th year. So we're coming to the end of a 13-year cycle, because this is a 13th year. Okay, next we add the last day of the year, but now we're not going to add another day. We're just going to move on to the next 13-year cycle. And as we move to the next 13-year cycle, this green square is going to jump out here to this point. This marks the solstice in my area of the globe, which is Mountain Standard Time. So once the green box moves out to here for December 20, for December of 2012, it's for the Mountain Standard Time part of the world. If you're on the other side of the world, this green box. This box here would turn green. If you're somewhere else in the world, you'd have another box turning green, which matches where the solstice time falls in your part of the world. But in my part of the world, this is where the green box sat for the solstice on the last day of the Mayan calendar, which lined up with all of these crosses in the blue cross, with all of these little X's in the blue cross. Okay. So let's go. We're going to start the new year, and you're going to see this green box jump out. Ready? Here you go. See how now this box is green? Now this is marking that the solstice for this part of the world is now happening around 2 to 3, 4 o'clock in the morning for the next 13 years. And we move forward. You'll see the days counting. You're just counting days. Weeks. So you're on the 3rd week over here, 3rd week here, still the 1st month, 1st year of the 4-year cycle. So that's how the calendar counts, and this is the jumping out the green right there, shows the adjustment to get the winter solstice right on track. So where it's 35 seconds off per year. Okay, so how does the calendar relate to the 6-element model? Well, the week cycle shows 6 days. Which corresponds to the 6 elements before returning to the spirit of the Blue Cross on the 7th day. The other cycles show 12 periods for 12 meridians before returning to the spirit of the Blue Cross on the 13th time period. The 4 quadrants of the calendar reflect the 4 bodies with which a person expresses life in the worlds of experience. Pretty standard, pretty simple. You just bring these simple little patterns of 4, 7, and 13, put them into this, and you can see the whole yearly cycle exact to within 35 seconds a year. Now, what is this Blue Cross? I've mentioned it throughout the video. You can look at it in many different ways depending on your spiritual tradition, but it is ultimately a very meaningful time period to mark. So you might as well just take it into that spiritual aspect of saying, okay, if it's so meaningful, it must be spiritual. So time passes through the 4 cardinal points of the Blue Cross. These can be times of rest, spiritual retreat, or time off from work, or one can make them special times of celebration, however you want to do it. Time passes on the Blue Cross every 7th day of the daily cycle, every 13th week of the weekly cycle, every 13th month of the monthly cycle, which is always the last month before the winter solstice, every 13th year of the yearly cycle. And it's on the added day at the end of every year. And it's on the added days at the end of every 4-year periods within a 13-year cycle. So ultimately, this calendar is simple, very exact, symbolically consistent, and meaningful. So that's the calendar.